I used to think the Pine Barrens were just a stretch of dead trees and bad roads. That was before I heard something moving in the dark that sounded like it was following my car. It was late, too late for anything good to be happening out there. I was driving alone through South Jersey, cutting through a part of the Pine Barrens I barely knew because I wanted to get home faster. That was the first mistake. The second was trusting the GPS when it started glitching and sending me deeper into the woods instead of back toward the highway. The road narrowed, the trees closed in, and the silence got so complete it felt like the whole forest was holding its breath. Then I heard it again. A slow, dragging sound. Not footsteps, not exactly. Something heavier, something moving just out of sight, keeping pace with me through the brush. I turned the radio on. Static. I turned it off. The sound was still there. And then, in the edge of my headlights, I saw something tall move between the trees. Just a glimpse. Enough to tell me it was not a person. Enough to tell me it had been watching me before I ever saw it. I hit the gas. The tires screamed against the pavement as I pushed the car harder, expecting to see another vehicle, another house, another sign that I was still in the normal world. But the road just kept going, and the woods kept getting darker. A few minutes later, I saw a gas station light up ahead like a lifeline. It looked almost abandoned, except for one buzzing sign and a single weak light over the door. I went inside mostly because I needed directions, maybe coffee, maybe someone sane enough to tell me I was just rattled. The man behind the counter looked up when I walked in. He didn't ask where I was coming from. He didn't ask if I needed anything. He just looked past me, out the door, and said, "You shouldn't be out there after dark." I gave a tired smile and told him I got lost. He didn't smile back. He said, "That's not what I meant." I asked him what he was talking about. He stared at me for a second, then said, "You hear it?" I didn't answer. He nodded like he already knew I had. Then he said the name like it was something people around there still didn't like speaking too loud. The Jersey Devil. I almost laughed. Almost. Because even then, standing there under buzzing fluorescent lights, it sounded too much like a campfire story. Too clean, too legendary, too ridiculous for the way he was looking at me. But then he reached under the counter and pulled out an old newspaper clipping in a plastic sleeve. He slid it toward me. The headline was about sightings in 1909. Not rumors, not folklore. Sightings. I looked up at him and he said, "This place has been hearing that thing for longer than you've been alive." Then he started telling me the story. Mother Leeds, the storm, the cursed 13th child, the birth that went wrong, the thing that supposedly came into the world screaming before it flew out through the chimney and into the pines. He told it fast, like he'd told it 100 times before and still didn't enjoy saying it. He didn't dress it up. He didn't need to. The story was already bad enough. According to the legend, the Leeds woman had too many children already and cursed the last one before it was born. And when the child arrived, it wasn't normal for even a second. It screamed, it changed, and then it was gone. Vanished into the woods like it had always belonged there. I remember looking at the newspaper clipping and thinking that was the part people always exaggerated. The flying, the horns, the wings, the monster shape. Then the man behind the counter said something that made my stomach tighten. "Everybody focuses on what it looked like," he said. "What they should focus on is what happened after." I asked him what he meant. He leaned in a little and said, "It never stayed a story." That was the moment I stopped feeling like I was just hearing a legend. He told me about the panic in 1909, how reports spread across New Jersey like a sickness, how people claimed they heard screaming from the tree line, how footprints were found in the snow, how towns started closing schools and sending armed men into the woods because too many people were saying the same thing in too many different places. Not all at once. That would have been easier to ignore. No, it came in pieces. One sighting here, another there, a shape over a fence, a sound on a roof, a thing in the dark where no thing should have been. And the more people talked, the worse it got. Because fear has a way of making a story feel bigger while it's still growing. I asked him if anyone ever proved it was fake. He shook his head. Then he said, You don't prove things fake by surviving them. That was when the light outside the gas station flickered, once, twice, then it went still. The whole place got quieter. Not dimmer, quieter. The kind of quiet that presses against your ears. The man behind the counter looked toward the window, and for the first time he looked genuinely afraid. Then I heard it. That same sound from the road, slow, heavy, closer now. Something dragging through brush just beyond the light. The man killed the overhead lights and said, "Don't move." I didn't. I couldn't. My whole body had locked up. Then something crossed the edge of the headlights, fast, too fast, tall enough to block part of the glow, wrong enough that my brain refused to make sense of it. I caught a shape, a bent head, a flash of something pale and hard, and then a pair of eyes that caught the light and burned back at me red. The thing stopped outside the station. For 1 second, I thought it was looking in. For 1 second, I thought it knew exactly which one of us was easier to take. Then it let out a sound I still can't describe right. Not a roar, not a scream. Something between both of them. Something that sounded like it had been torn out of a throat that was never built to hold it. The windows rattled. The man behind the counter whispered, "Go." So I ran. I got to my car so fast I nearly dropped the keys. The second I started the engine, I saw it. Not clearly, not fully, just enough. A tall shape at the edge of the lot, wings folded tight, body twisted toward the road, and the outline of something that looked like it had never learned how to be alive in daylight. I threw the car into drive and shot out of there. The tires screamed, the road blurred, and behind me I heard the sound again. Not running, not chasing, launching. I drove like a man trying to outrun a nightmare that had already memorized his license plate. The road turned, the trees thickened, and the pines seemed to swallow my headlights whole. Then, right in the middle of the shoulder, I saw tracks in the mud. Huge ones, too deep to belong to anything normal. And beside them, where the dirt had been torn up, were marks like something had landed there from above. I kept going. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the wheel. Then the scream came again. This time it was right outside the car. I slammed the brakes. Headlights cut across the road, and there it was. For one impossible second, I saw the full shape. A head too narrow to be human. A body taller than a deer and wrong in every possible way. Hind legs that didn't bend the way they should. And wings. Not huge bat wings in the movie sense. Something worse. Something thin and dark and folded in a way that made it feel more alive than if it had been massive. It moved toward the tree line, then stopped like it was deciding whether I was worth the trouble. I swear to you, it looked amused. Then it was gone. 1 second it was there. The next it had thrown itself up over the trees and disappeared into the dark. I sat there with the car still running and the road empty in front of me, trying to breathe like my lungs still belonged to me. I drove home before dawn. I didn't sleep. I didn't tell anybody. I kept the whole thing locked inside my head like maybe that would make it smaller. But 2 days later, I found 3 long scratches across the driver's side door, deep enough to cut through the paint. And in the mud by the tire, there was a footprint I still can't explain. Not a hoof, not a paw, something in between. Something that looked like it had been made by a creature that had never been meant to leave a mark in the first place. After that, I started asking questions I probably shouldn't have asked. And the weird part was how many people around the pines had answers ready. Not perfect answers, not the kind that makes you comfortable, just enough to tell you the story never really left. A truck driver said he'd heard screaming near an old road cut. A local woman told me her father used to lock the doors when storms rolled in after midnight. A ranger I spoke to wouldn't say the name, but he warned me not to stop my car if I ever heard something moving beside the road in the dark. He said, "Whatever you think you saw, don't go back for another look." That line stuck with me, because the worst part was realizing the gas station man had known all of this without needing to explain it. He had looked at me like I was already halfway into the wrong story, like the pines had picked me before I ever knew there was a choice. I used to think legends were just stories people repeated because they liked being scared. Now I think some places keep their stories alive because the thing at the center of them never actually left. And if the old accounts are even half true, the Jersey Devil was never just one monster. It was a warning that learned how to survive. A shape in the dark that got passed down from one generation to the next until nobody could tell where the truth ended and the fear began. Maybe that's why people still talk about it. Maybe that's why the Pine Barrens still feel wrong after dark. Not because they're haunted, because they're remembered. And every now and then, when the house is quiet and the wind hits the window just right, I hear that sound again. Not outside, not yet. Just far enough away to make my skin go cold. A dragging sound, then silence. Then something that feels a lot like breathing. So if you ever find yourself driving through the Pine Barrens after midnight and the road suddenly goes dead quiet, don't stop. Don't get out. And if you hear something moving in the trees beside you, whatever you do, don't answer it.
This has been Whisper Dread Studios. Some stories were never meant to be told. We told it anyway.